But coach, my situation is different. Today on the Landlord Coach Daily-ish show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Landlord Coach Daily-ish show. My name is Mark Dolfini, your host. Landlord Coach, it's really good to see you. So the Landlord Coach Daily-ish show, what do we do here? That's a great question. Lots of different things. A lot of it doesn't really have much to do with landlording. It actually has a lot to do with running and owning your own business. And I know there's many people who actually have businesses of their own that want to maybe buy and invest in rental properties. And the last thing in the world that I want to do is to make you into a landlord. I want to make you into a business owner. So this show is designed for you, the rental property operators and those who maybe want to be rental property operators. And even if you don't, there's lots of people that are in the inner circle that, quite frankly, don't even have any interest in owning rental property. But lots of what we talk about here on the show is designed for entrepreneurs to help them become more time wealthy and become more effective in their lives. So what are we talking about today? The topic for today is, but coach, my situation's different, right? Everybody's got, hold on a second. You don't know my deal. You don't know what my problem is, right? Well, we're going to get to that here in just a second. But really quick, let me do a shameless plug for the Time Wealthy Investor. If you would like to get a free copy of the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, which is right here. Look at how good I'm getting at pointing at this thing, right? The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, if you'd like to get a free copy of yours, all I ask you to do is cover shipping. And it covers lots of the topics that we cover on the show, which is the vision infrastructure process method. For those of you who are real estate investors now and know the BRRRR method, the VIP method is about building a business, and it picks up where the BRRRR method leaves off. So that is what that's about. And if you'd like a copy of that, just feel free to go over to landlordcoach.com/videos, and I will get that in your hot little hands in short order. So what we're talking about is, but coach, my situation is different. And this is really about the excuses that we hold on to, right? I remember back, there was a time in my life, and this is not that long ago. I would say probably within the last maybe 2 years, did I really step out of this and realize that everything that I needed to take control of, even things that maybe weren't necessarily my doing, but I had to take ownership of. If I didn't see myself as the problem, I could not see myself as part of the solution. So with those powerful words in mind, I really started to take 100% ownership of really whatever it was that showed up in my life. And it's really funny because no matter what I planned, no matter what goals I set, I'm very goal-oriented. I always have been very goal-oriented. It was interesting because if someone would say, okay, what are your goals? And you can state them publicly. I mean, there's lots of really good things that you can do to make sure that you are setting yourself up for the most possible, for the best possible outcome for you to establish and meet your goals, right? Especially for those of you who are very goal-oriented or would like a better life and better lifestyle. One of those things is to write your goals down rather than just simply have them in your head, is loosely defined, but specifically sit down and write down your goals and be as specific as you possibly can with your goals, right? So as you're writing those goals down and then you share those goals, you let a friend know, let somebody know. If you don't have a coach or a mastermind group that you can help hold you accountable, get those goals, let someone you know at least make them public in some way. So that's another way. And then of course you want to have a timeline tied to that goal and all these other things. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But it was really interesting. So no matter what I did as I was going through that process, it was really interesting because as I was writing out those goals, it was really interesting that no matter what I did, it was almost as if I was like baking in the cake. Like I was automatically thinking of an excuse as to what I would say if I didn't reach that goal. It was almost, in fact, I can remember the mindset that I would put myself in of, well, what will I say? What excuse? Because again, I can be very persuasive. I can be very, I can use my words, right? But what would I say if I didn't reach that goal? What could I possibly say to them that would, make that smooth it over, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's really interesting. So no matter if I was like, all right, I wanted to have 10 rental units by a certain date, or if I wanted to have a certain amount of revenues coming in by a certain date, or, whatever the goal was by the certain date that was measurable, if I didn't make that goal, I would have a built-in excuse, or I would just kind of not bring it back up again or whatever else. I got very, very clever at it, very, very good at it. Now, what I'm talking about specifically, and those of you who might be familiar with SMART goals, if you are familiar with it, just, hold your breath for just a couple seconds while I go over these. So SMART goals are specific, right? That's the S. The M is measurable, right? You want the goals to be measurable. A is debatable. Some people call it different things. I believe that the A is action oriented, right? What's the action? What's the activity that you're going to change to make that goal happen, right? That's where most goals fall apart, is they put a goal together, but they never actually adjust their activity to be focused on that goal. Like, okay, well, if you want to lose 40 pounds, what's the activity that you're actually going to put in your calendar to make sure that that's a true thing, right? So you don't ever actually base it in activity. That most goals are never going to happen. You have to have some action, some activity that makes that goal, makes it actually going to happen, right? Some activity tied to it. So you've got specific, measurable, actionable, right? You've got R, are the goals realistic? Now, I don't necessarily always like realistic goals. I like goals that are a little bit of a stretch. I mean, sometimes I like a huge stretch, because if this is sometimes I'll like to have several realistic goals and one goal that's like blow it out of the water. Like this was a goal that would change my world, right? So that's like, don't always like realistic goals, but if you're like, okay, I want to flap my arms and fly to the moon, okay, unless you have invented a technology in the last 1,000 years that no one knows about, then that's obviously not realistic. But I think you get my point on that. So stretch goal is one stretch goal, and then maybe your other goals are more realistic. And then T is timely. What's the time frame in terms of what you want to do, right? So specific, measurable, action. What's the action? What's the activity you're going to take? Realistic, or maybe unrealistic or stretch, and timely. What is the how quickly are you going to make these goals happen, right? So I would go through all of that. I would write everything down, realistic, all that, right? And I had this all out. And I would even share it with a friend. I would make sure that people were holding me accountable to it and following up with me and all this other stuff. And I always had a built-in excuse, no matter what I did. And I struggled with this for a really long time. I had coaches that were working with me. I had other people. And it was really interesting, because it wasn't until I started having my coaches hold me accountable, which was so here's a really funny thing. So one of the coaches that I worked with was he knew my political affiliation. I'm not so political anymore. It's exhausting. But he knew my political affiliation. So he said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. And I said, if I don't make this particular goal by this date, right? It was a pretty aggressive goal, actually. If I don't have this aggressive goal by this date, then I have to send a check to my opposition candidate. This is a presidential election at the time. The opposition candidates campaign fund, and I have to post it on social media, and I cannot explain why. Right? So imagine that for some motivation, right? So it was pretty cool that I did make that. But man, that was some harsh motivation, right? I mean, there was no excuses, and he had the check. He was going to make, he was going to post that and all this. So it was really, really interesting. But, it really came down to some basic things that were underlying that I really had to get my head around. And at first I thought it was just, it's a fear of failure. I didn't want to try things and then fail and then be afraid of failing and feeling like a failure and everything else. But it also, I had to recognize it was tied to a fear of success. I'm like, why would you have a fear of success? Well, I had to recognize what the root of that was, really fear of loss. It would be easier to never have it than to get it and lose it, right? I mean, that I could deal with of never having it, but getting it and then losing it, whatever, getting $1 million and then losing $1 million, I don't want to go through that. I mean, I kind of went through that once, right, back in 2008. But it was really interesting that as I started doing some study, and I was starting doing some more studying, and I started doing some coaching. I wasn't really doing landlord coach quite that much yet, but I was coaching other people, kind of doing it for, for free, for hamburgers on the side and that sort of thing. But what I started doing, and I started researching the subconscious mind, and I started researching, hypnosis and self-hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Started researching that entire thing about the subconscious mind. When I was recognizing that I was self-sabotaging, it was almost as if I didn't even want to take the chance because of the potential for self-sabotage. I just, self-sabotage, what self-destruction, whatever it was. And then I recognized, as I did more and more study, that self-sabotage and that self-punishment was tied to some form of guilt for something, which is why I would have felt the need to punish myself and give me a perfect excuse as to why I shouldn't have succeeded, why that goal was not worthy of me. And I thought, man, this was really, really interesting. So whenever I hear, but coach, my situation is different, I'm like, well, so was mine, right? When in reality, my situation, as it turned out, was not different, because I was sharing the same guilt as everybody else. And the guilt was, who knows? It could have been, I was raised in a Scottish, Italian, Catholic, Anglican Catholic household, so pick your guilt there, right? But I mean, it's interesting that, that this guilt, whatever it was tied to things that were so incredibly ridiculous that you would have said, why would you have any feelings of guilt about that, right? So it was funny that, when I started talking to different people, and I actually did start, coaching in Landlord Coach, I would recognize that these people would have this self-punishment, this self-sabotage, and all the things that, that I definitely recognized was that same guilt, and that people were holding on to guilt and holding on to pain and holding on to this failure as if somehow that pain was going to repay them in some way. I mean, that's exactly what I was doing. Failed relationships, failed deals, all these things that just added to more and more reasons as to why I did not deserve success, right? So I promise you, if that's something this is something that's resonating with you, I promise you're not different. And that's okay. But because the good thing is you can just basically from the law of substitution is just you can't really get rid of that guilt. I mean, you can release yourself, you can do that stuff, but really through the law of substitution is just find something that's good in your life, and when you're stepping into your power, and just replace it with that guilty feeling. And that's literally that simple. So it's not that complex. I mean, sometimes it takes several months of doing that over and over again, where you're forgiving yourself of whatever guilt and replacing it when you're stepping into a moment of power and you feel powerful, and all of a sudden you are now forgiven. I mean, you now don't come up with these excuses. So now when I'm setting goals, and like for right now, I have a fairly lofty goal for this year for my business. I really truly believe that in my inner circle, I'm just going to step into my power for a second. I'm really good. I'm a good coach. And not because I have lots of knowledge and stuff like that, but because I have lots of different things to draw from, but I also have lots of different emotional pain to draw from, and know and recognize when people were doing the same exact thing that I was doing. And I hold them accountable. I don't let them hide. I do all those things that I believe a good coach should do, which is different from a teacher, which is different from a mentor, which is different from a professor. If those of you who attended college, did your professors really give two hoots if you showed up to class? None of mine did. And probably none that I could ever talk to. They don't care. That's not what they're there for. They're not there to coach you and hold you accountable. Some will, but that's not what they're getting paid for, and they don't care. A coach will throw an arm around a shoulder, will yell at you when you need to be yelled at, and will boost you up when you need to be boosted. And that's one of the things that I'm just having a great at. So let me just say my goal. I really want to have 45 in my inner circle, right? And I know that there's lots of people that I can help, right? So if I put that out there, now, even 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh man, I don't want to say that, right? I don't want to put that out there, but I'm not there yet. I'm probably a little over a tenth of the way there, right? But that is because I know that I have the ability and power to change that. And I'm not scared or skeptical to say that out loud, right? So this is one of the things that if you want to do this and you really want to change this, recognize it for what it is, number one. And number two, get your goals in front of somebody that you know realistically that you're going to have them hold you accountable to something that you definitely don't want. That definitely changed things for me. But also recognize too is that guilt is not serving you in any meaningful way, and just to literally let that crap go. So that is all I have for today. You guys are a quiet crowd today. That's okay. I know it's been a busy week. It's just been very, very busy. But anyway, that is all I have for today's everybody. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug the book really fast. If you are interested in the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, just go ahead and head over to landlordcoach.com/videos. And again, if you are interested in joining us at the Landlord VIP Lounge, we talk about stuff like this. Business stuff. So even if you don't really have any interest in rental properties per se, feel free to join us. There's going to be plenty of stuff to talk about, especially if you're a small business owner or you run a business for someone else. There's going to be lots of different topics for you in that room. And that is all I have for today, folks. So please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. But most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have a great day. I'll see you guys next time.